we are going to be looking at the provision for international pupils at some really fine boarding schools here in the UK who are representative of a great British boarding education. The term pastoral care will be used today, and for those of you who are unsure what that means, pastoral care is about your children, the individual care and attention that is given to them, how they are challenged, how they're kept safe, and how they are kept happy, because happy and fulfilled children do well. Before we start on the webinar proper, just a little bit of housekeeping, if I may. As guests, you can hopefully hear and see us, but we can't see or hear you. You are more than welcome to ask questions throughout, and you will do so, please, by the questions function button, which is found on the panel. Those questions will be fed into me by my colleague, John Milne, and we hope to answer as many as possible, sometimes during the webinar, but if not, in a Q&A session at the end. So please do ask your questions, however silly and minor, micro they seem. We are here to answer and to help you understand more about a British boarding education. And as you may have heard, the webinar is being recorded. It will be available to you all once the session is over, and for you to pass on to friends and colleagues if you see fit. And now to our last panel. This is our last webinar of the academic year. I have to inform the panelists that they're under a lot of pressure, because our last webinar involved 3 outstanding sixth form pupils from 3 of our member schools. They were poised, they were articulate, refreshingly open and honest, and all in all, they were quite superb. So to Jamie, Ranjit and Colin, hard act to follow. May I introduce, please, Dr. Ranjit Chatterjee, who is Deputy Head at Ellesmere College. I'd also like to introduce Jamie McKenzie, who is the International Students Officer at Framlingham College, and Colin Gunning, who is the Deputy Head Pastoral at Sedbergh School, all of whom, as you will discover shortly, are deeply involved in the lives of boarders and international boarding pupils at their own schools. So we have a superbly qualified panel, and we are going to kick off with a first question, and I'm going to ask that first question, if I may, to Colin. And the question is, how important is the admissions process in allowing international boarding students to feel confident when they arrive at your school? But basically, how do you prepare them to arrive to succeed? Colin.
Thank you. To answer the question, it's very important. And to that end, our admissions team spend a lot of time in communication with our prospective pupils coming in, and it can be from sometimes years in advance of them arriving. And these questions can be weekly, monthly, and there can be phone calls and all sorts. So we consider this communication to be very, very important before our pupils arrive at Sedbergh. Those who are able to visit the UK and visit the school, obviously we'll show them around in detail and they can stay for half a day or so. But we also encourage those who can to come and stay for what we call a taster, which is a couple of nights in the school, which means therefore that you're not just seeing what we say we do on a video somewhere, but you're actually seeing it in real life. And I think that can be invaluable for some pupils who are fortunate to visit, because it can really break the ice and they get to meet some of the pupils in advance of them coming, and that really can make things much more open for pupils who are nervous and anxious about going to school overseas. In addition to that, and we're conscious that most of our pupils from overseas can't visit before they come, the school will send out significant documents, but we try and make sure that those are tailored to those who are reading them. So the parent handbook is written very much for the parents' need and conversation, things that parents raise questions about. And that would come from the admissions team. But we ask the housemaster or the housemistress to contact the pupils with house handbooks, and these are much more informal documents, and often with the kind of intangible expectations of pupils and life in houses. And pupils, before they arrive, really appreciate that. And again, we then ask pupils in the school at the appropriate age. So if a pupil was arriving who was perhaps coming into year 9 and was a girl, we'd ask one of our current year 9 girls to get in touch with them by whatever means. And as you will well know as parents, pupils ask questions that adults might not necessarily have anticipated, and pupils, as was suggested earlier, are wonderfully honest, and they can answer these questions in a way that we wouldn't have dreamed. And that really does break the ice, and they start to form relationships and friendships in advance of them coming. And again, that can be invaluable to try and overcome any anxiety. In terms of the arrival itself, we can manage all details of this from airports, and I think all schools are doing that now, especially under COVID. The level of demand has risen from the UK government, and I think English boarding schools have risen to that challenge impressively. And we certainly meet colleagues from other schools at airports now, and it's a very, very slick process of meeting overseas pupils at airports, and various travel officers will be there picking them up, putting them into cars or buses with staff on board, knowing who they are, knowing who to expect, and looking after all the little things which cause worry in transit.
I think if I may, there, Colin, and before asking the others their opinions, I think one of the great things, odd thing to say, but during the COVID process has actually ensured that boarding schools are getting their processes and their communications even better with parents. I mean, you mentioned there the specifics of pickups from airports. It is now expected, and schools will do it, and they will do it beautifully. So yeah, no, thank you for that, Colin. Jamie, anything to add?
I think part of one of the process of making sure that international boarders as well, especially if English isn't their first language, we want to make sure that part of the process is that they obviously sit an English exam. If we feel that their English level is maybe not quite strong enough, or if there's something that they need to work on, we would always suggest that maybe they do some extra tuition, some extra lessons. But usually we actually suggest that they come to the UK and do that at a language school somewhere in the UK. So sometimes they actually get a bit of a feel for what boarding life is like pre-arrival. And it's a great way for them to kind of boost their English levels. I think it's a little bit more difficult for older students if their language level is a lot weaker to really access the curriculum. So it's important that we, part of the process when we look at the admissions process for international boarding students is to really look at English levels as well, make sure that they feel confident, make sure that they know exactly what to expect, because I don't think it's fair for people to arrive whose English level is not very good.
Jamie, I mean, 100%. And just briefly to mention there about the admissions process, I think it's really, really important that when any pupil is advised that they should come to one of the schools, that an honest appraisal by an agent or consultant is that actually the English is not good enough to allow you to succeed. Yeah. It sounds pejorative, but it's a fact. If you can't arrive in the classroom and access, it's going to be a really tough experience, isn't it?
Yeah,
really
tough. It's a difficult word, because sometimes it's also depending on the character of the pupil as well. I think the younger the pupil is, the easier it is in some ways to really get them to immerse themselves in the language and improve. It is a lot more difficult for a year 12 or lower 6 pupil to really, if their language level is not very good, to really sort of get fully involved in the school and academic wise. But so I mean that's a big thing. But that's not to say we don't accept pupils whose English level is weak. It's one of those things that so long as we know that we can try and help them and support them, then that's the key thing. Yeah,
absolutely. Ranjit, anything to add there?
Okay, I think Colin certainly covered most bases there with his sort of chat on how things work at his school, and I think that sort of speaks for us all, probably. The only bits I'd add, and Colin's probably missed some of these off, is that especially now with the advent of Zoom becoming much more popular in Teams, those that can't get into the country and can't visit, we're able to do a face-to-face online, and we've done that before anyway, but it's become much more prevalent, I would say, that pupils are able to be spoken to by the admissions, and certainly if it's a sixth form, then the head of sixth form would also have a call with them, and then we just follow the same process. I think, you know, Colin is very much speaking for us all there. You know, with people are contacted, parents are contacted, and it goes sort of from the admissions, and then it sort of collapses down into the houses and then straight down to the tutors themselves. So hopefully before they arrive or fly in or wherever, however they're getting here, they've already had quite a bit of contact with staff, and they can already put a name to a face. So really everything Colin said is absolutely.
Super. I think, you know, to round that question off, it's about the appropriateness of the application, is it not, with the level of English being a major factor there. But I know all of your schools have a good holistic and broad attitude towards the potential of the child. You know, you are not schools, and there are some in the UK, and they're well positioned to do so, to basically say, we don't think you are going to get the grades that you need to be at this school. Whereas you are very much more involved in value added. You will take appropriate, and I say risks, but I hope you know what I mean by that, in saying we think this child is really going to grow with us and just get better and better and better. And that to me is the power of a good education. Second question, Colin touched on it slightly about the airports, but on arrival, what sort of welcome and induction program might a child, an international boy or girl, expect from your school? How do you help them to settle in? Because that settling process, if it takes too long, becomes awkward. Perhaps Jamie, if you could open on that one, please.
Yeah, so similar to what Colin said, pupils are always contacted before they arrive by housemasters, housemistresses, and usually by a team, so that they can put a face to the name, so that when they do arrive, obviously they're collected from the airport or from the station, wherever it is, brought to the school. They're not met with somebody completely strange. There's always somebody that they have a familiarity with, usually via teams. And then once they arrive, they get to meet the whole house team, so house staff team. And I think probably the key person, and I think this is true in all boarding houses, boarding schools, the key person is probably the matron in the boarding house. I certainly remember my matron when I was at boarding school, and she was the most invaluable person to have. The person that was your basically your mother whilst you were at school. So they're some of the key people. So you'd meet the house staff team, so the housemaster, the resident tutors. You would get to meet your own tutor as well, so that's academic wise. And then within the house there is the actual head of house. So the pupils themselves, so the head of house, there's always a prefect we have in each house that's sort of dedicated to welcoming international pupils. All pupils are given a mentor and a buddy, so one from their year, and then a senior member in the house who acts as a mentor to make sure that they settle in. And they basically get shown around the school. There is a kind of induction day for them as well, where they arrive on the Sunday. There's an induction day, team building, getting to know other pupils that are new to the school. There's no real difference, I don't think, really, in terms of how we approach, an induction for an international boarder as we do anybody that's new, because it is a new school. I mean, it is more difficult as well, I think, for international pupils to come, because you don't have that safety blanket of your family being nearby. That can be really tricky, but at the same time, we don't want to treat anybody differently. There's pretty much the same induction. But for international boarders, sort of the end of that first week, that first proper weekend that they have in school, we tend to have a sort of international pupil evening, and that's not just for pupils who are international, but even British pupils who live abroad, so expat families. If we've got British pupils that are living internationally, then they'll come along, and we have sort of informal gathering where they get to kind of chat, and there's a bit more focus on a little bit about expectations, and prefects kind of give them, and senior pupils give them a bit more chat and talk to them about kind of what to expect in the school, the kind of meals. That's usually quite a big thing for international pupils, the kind of food that they can expect, and then who to kind of see, and then they'll get to meet key people. So teaching staff, the ones that will probably teach them in their subjects, they'll get to meet, but tutors are the key ones, and then also the chaplain as well will be there to kind of meet. Yeah.
Super. Thank you, Ranjit. Anything different or to add? Ranjit, we've got a. That's all right. No.
That's all right.
That's standard Zoom.
Trying to be good
Zoom
there.
thing the world over.
Yeah, we're pretty similar, really. We have an international coordinator as well, who would meet them on arrival, and then we would have pupils on hand to show them to their rooms. Now, interesting, we get we don't just get pupils flying in by themselves. In some cases, their parents or some family member do accompany them. So they're also made welcome, and they get to see. Sometimes it's their first visit to the school, maybe even the UK. So they do get to see around the school, and we're able to facilitate that as well. Yeah, they get shown to their rooms and meet their housemaster and mistress and their tutor straight away. And then they get a buddy, same as Jamie says, and then they sort of get their sort of first taste of whatever's going on. We're lucky we have a uniform shop on site. So if they haven't already got their things, then they'll have probably made an appointment anyway and pop down to see them. And we also do appointments with the housemaster and mistress in advance, so that there's a dedicated slot, not just a drop-in, so they can have a chat with them very specifically. That's very specifically if parents are accompanying them. And other than that, it's as James says, there are buddies. They go round, they get to meet all the key people. The house mother, or the equivalent of the matron, and the whole pastoral team is there on hand on the day they're on.
Super. Colin, I'm going to not ask you for your response to the same question. Can I ask you, please, quick fire, because both Jamie and Ranjit have introduced terms that some people on the other side of the world just might have absolutely no understanding of. Colin, what is a housemaster or housemistress?
This is the person who is responsible for all the pupils in that boarding house. So we have 9 boarding houses, and each of those has a housemaster or a housemistress. Their family live in, they often have children with them as well, and their primary role is to look after the welfare of those pupils in that house. And that house might be anything from 50 to 70, possibly slightly bigger at some schools.
Next one, what is a matron?
The matron is traditionally a lady who would look after things like housekeeping in the house, laundry, catering. But increasingly, I think that's changing, and I think it's probably less housekeeping now, and it's more pastoral care. And they're not solely female either these days. And some names have changed. So while some schools still call them matrons, some call them house parents, house mothers, assistant housemasters. But their job is increasingly solely the pastoral welfare of pupils, and they spend all their time. And as Jamie quite rightly pointed out, these people are invaluable because they will probably spend more time with the children than the housemaster or housemistress will do.
Would it be fair to say that many housemasters, housemistresses, but not exclusively, are teaching members of staff?
They are, I think at most of our schools, they will be teachers, and they're often senior teachers. So they'll have a relatively heavy commitment outside of the house. They might be heads of departments or senior staff as well. The reason for that is they're usually very good and experienced at looking after the many problems which teenage children can occasionally bring us. But they're devoted to their jobs, but they do have other issues outside the house, whereas the matron, if I call them the matron, is dedicated solely to the pupils in that house.
And last one for you on the spot, what is a prefect, please?
Prefects are older pupils, usually in their last year at school in the upper sixth, and there might be school prefects who have a school-wide responsibility, or house prefects which have a house-based responsibility. And these pupils are selected on their past performance. They might be particularly brilliant academically, musically, or they might just be incredibly kind and great listeners. And possibly importantly, most importantly, is they're very good role models for younger pupils. So whilst we as teachers all are convinced that we are experts in our field, children often like to listen to 18-year-olds rather than 40-year-olds. So they play another equally important role.
Fantastic. And would it be fair to say at your schools that increasingly there has been, if not an expectation, but it has been provided that training is given to prefects in terms of care and mentoring in particular?
Certainly, I think in my time here, it has changed beyond recognition, where there used to be just a presumption that you would know what to do because you've been there and done it. That's no longer taken. I think now we acknowledge that historically things might not have always been perfect, and we do talk at length to our prefects about the responsibility they have and the key role they play in listening. And an awful lot of information that comes out about anxious children or happy children comes from our prefects because they're very good listeners.
Superb. And I think, thank you all three of you, because I think what you're showing attendees here is that care, listening, and that every boy or girl, whether they're international or not, Jamie, absolutely, great point that the induction should be exactly the same for every new pupil to a school, that it's all about care.
I think one of the things as well, I think part of your question was how quickly do you think they settle in? I think it's almost impossible to give a definite answer because every pupil's different. I think that's one of those ones where it's really easy to say, oh, we reckon they'll be settled in within the first week. No, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're an overseas pupil or a UK-based pupil. If you're starting a new school, it's really daunting and it can be difficult. New environment, new things. So it's never easy to say how quickly we think they settle in. I mean, every school will put in the right support structure, provide them with mentors, buddies, and things like that. And you've got the right people in place in-house and in the school to help them settle in. So, but to give a definite answer, no, I think that would be impossible.
And I don't think you can. And I think later on, we'll have a question about communication with parents, because that, if a child is not settling in, is key. My next question, and I think we can probably do this one terribly quickly because you really have answered a lot of it. But I'm going to ask Ranji, who would be the pupil's main point of contact in those first few days?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, the tutor is central. So okay. The first thing they're going to do on the sort of Monday morning or whichever day of the week it is they're going to meet their tutor, and they'll have certainly the morning would be an induction part to the whole school, the whole start, and they'll be with their tutor all the time. So, and that's the person that's going to be contacting home. That's the person that's going to be making sure that the welfare of their charges are in order. But linked to that, especially the overseas ones, there's international coordinator and our EAL department, which helps with their English, and of course they will get to know them much more and have a chat with them if they need that sort of help. So along with the housemaster and housemistresses and house mothers or matrons, whichever term you want to use, and those are the sort of core people at the start of it all. And then, of course, they branch out and get to know more and more. But if we come back to it, it is the tutor that sort of makes sure that the contact is between family and home and school, and then their welfare, especially in the evenings, as the people that are working in the house during the evening.
Super. If Colin, Jamie, anything wildly different from that at your schools or similar? Colin?
Very similar. I think in the first few days and weeks, perhaps what we call assistant, the matron, is perhaps the one that has the most contact, because those issues are more to do with the right uniform? Is my bedroom warm enough? Have I got the right food? Have I got enough clothes? And it's those kind of matters which are matron type matters. As time goes on, the tutor will pick up on a more strategic, tutorial, academic sort of vision for the child. So, but I think the first week, the matron's critical.
Okay, and Colin, I would, you there talk about, are they warm enough? Have they got the right clothes? For those of you who don't know Sedbergh, it is high up. It's in the hills. It's with the sheep. One most wonderful, wonderful sight. But yes, they need the clothes. Jamie, anything different?
No, exactly the same in terms of the pupils' contacts. I'm head of ESL here, so English Second Language. So I get to see the international pupils a lot, and I think the one thing I would say from that perspective for me is, it's when you see them in the mainstream subjects, any other subject, it's very easy for them to sort of hide away, shy away slightly, especially in the first couple of weeks, because you really are trying to tune your ears and you're trying to get to know who the teachers are and what's going on, and that can be quite difficult. Whereas, usually in an ESL classroom, there's only maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, so it's a very small class, and it's a little bit safer. So actually, you kind of get to know them a little bit better in that sense. So, but any issues that come up there would be directly told to.
And would I be right there, Jamie, in saying that not all international pupils would have to do that?
Yeah,
that would be based upon.
No, that would be based upon their English level and their needs for support in other subjects as well. The main thing for ESL is it's basically like support for learning. It's just that they need support for their English.
Fantastic.
So that's all it is.
So equally academically brilliant as others.
Yeah.
But accessing it because of their language.
Yeah.
Is more. Okay, fantastic. Colin, it blends into the next question. How do you ensure that the very differing academic backgrounds of your international pupils are met within the classroom? They will have come from different cultures, and they may well have come from very different schools with very different learning styles and approaches.
As has been said, we will do pre-assessments before pupils join us in maths, and particularly in English, which obviously help us as a starting point, but it's very much a starting point only. But once they do arrive and we get to know them, experience suggests, as was just said, that we can find brilliant children who are struggling with English, and therefore their exam papers that they sat were entirely misleading. And actually we can quickly realise that they really are quite capable in certain subjects. And therefore we need to attack certain aspects of English in order for them to excel in maths classrooms in England. And so that will happen very, very quickly. The other key thing that we do as well is what we call chem testing, which is testing of a pupil's ability and potential. And it goes well beyond that that's been coached or tutored beforehand. And it gives us a really clear indication of what pupils are capable of achieving, both at 16 and 18. And then we can start to make sure we have them in the right sets, the right subjects, and the right level of support. There's nothing worse than a child floundering because we've missed something. We're very eager early on to identify a child's ability and make sure they're getting the right level of support.
Super. And to add there, Jamie, anything?
Yeah, same sort of sets. Pupils are put into sets that their abilities show that they can cope with, and then regular reports, assessments on grades and attitude. So I think most schools are very different in terms of the way they would do reports. Here at Framlingham, we've got attitude and attainment. So that's done every half term. So every half term, tutors can see how they're doing in their certain different subjects. And then at the end of term, there's obviously end of term reports. So again, these are all sent out to parents so that they know exactly how their child is getting on in school. And if anything is really flagged, it's not left to the very end. Tutors are always in contact with parents. And then, as with most schools, there's again different words. We've got what we call hubs, which are these sort of learning, extra learning sessions for pupils where they can catch up on work or go see a teacher one-to-one to get help with something specific.
Super. Okay, Ranjit, I'm going to throw you a different question, but on the same theme. What about the child who is very used to sitting in a classroom where they are pumped full of knowledge and information, and academic success is deemed to be regurgitation as opposed to asking the question, why?
Okay, I mean that's quite a tough one, really, because
I know you're capable.
yeah, in the sense of, you know, we do get in certain subjects that area is very truthful. They're very good at regurgitating and bringing that back. But one of our big things here, of course, and I think, you know, all the other schools, is that you're looking for independent learners, and that's one of our big things that we want to do, and we want to get them to be asking the questions and posing those things. So it's not just about regurgitation, and certainly the system over here, if you do look towards exams, is not regurgitation. It's about interpretative skills, and we've certainly got to get those across and get them. And I guess this is the hardest part, is get them to allow them to make mistakes, because, you know, it's very easy to say, you know, 1 + 1 is 2, and I can do all of that, but to interpret something in a different way and then to come up with an answer, that's where we want them to move forward. So yes, so those, you know, they would do very well to a certain point.
I think we might have had a little freeze there, so I will interrupt whilst Ranjit unfreezes. And either Jamie or Colin, that concept of risk taking at a good boarding school, helping people to understand about risk taking is not just happening in the classroom, is it?
Absolutely not. No. You try to introduce it wherever you can, and it's something that, you know, it's a skill that they need for when they go to university or beyond school. It doesn't matter what they do once they leave school. You can't just kind of spoon feed them and expect them to be able to survive in sort of life beyond the walls of school. So that kind of idea of taking risks, knowing that if you make a mistake, so long as you learn from it, then that's where growth comes from.
Absolutely. Colin, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think boarding schools are a wonderfully safe environment in many ways, but actually the good boarding schools will really encourage children to fail. And I think that's something that's important. And culturally, that can be quite difficult for some pupils from different backgrounds, because they will always want to be seen to be successful. And actually, we would encourage you to say that actually you're not really going to be successful until you failed a few times. And so therefore, in a safe environment with lots of support, it's good to push the boundaries. You
both talked earlier, Ranjit, I think the connection has gone, and I hope he'll be able to join us. But you both talked earlier on about the role of the vital role of senior pupils. And my own experience in school, that those senior pupils help the younger boys and girls when they've made mistakes to get back on the track, because we all make mistakes, don't we?
It's easier for them for the younger pupils to relate to an older pupil, especially when, you know, teachers can always say to them, "Oh no, you know, we're giving you advice because we've experienced this," but it's you know, younger pupils will always listen more to the older pupils because they're so much closer in age and will believe them more. You know, they take on what they say, they take on their advice and learn from the mistakes more.
No, super. Well, welcome back, Ranjit.
Apologies for that. Not sure what happened.
That's absolutely fine. I think the point that has been beautifully made here is that boarding schools see success in the classroom as a byproduct of children who are feeling comfortable in and challenged in all areas of life, where they can take risks, get it wrong. It all comes together. But it doesn't happen in the first 2 weeks, does it? Colin?
No, not at all. I think when our pupils come, and especially from different backgrounds within the UK and from without, they're very keen to show a face of success and how perfect they are. And only once they're truly settled and happy in this environment will we really start to make progress. And that starts to happen after a few weeks and months of them settling in and being confident with their new friends and surroundings.
Which is, to me, why, if in times post-COVID and certainly times before, the importance of visiting a school before you accept a place there, because it is only when you come into a school and you wander around a boarding house and see the relationships between staff and staff and staff and pupils and pupils and pupils, that you think, wow, I'm going to feel good here. And it is such a shame, isn't it, that obviously visits have been curtailed recently, but we're starting to pick up on that. There is a question. Why has the UK independent school sector been so good at responding to the uncertainties of the past year? Would anybody pick up on that one?
I can give it a stab. I guess is that to a large extent we were already there. We're already dealing with internationals. We're already dealing with people coming from all over the place, and having to react to being a boarding school and being loco apprentice a lot of the time for many pupils. We've been thrown quite a few curveballs in the past, and this was just another one. And then with the support you get from other schools, and we're able to talk to other schools, and the British Schools Association, they sort of helped put things together. It was actually relatively easy to do these things. I think most internationals got on board with things like Teams or Zoom very quickly, and then we were able to provide that. And then we just sort of have a big team that got together and sort of paved the way forward, really, making sure that we could keep going.
The response across the sector, I think your answer is representative there, Ranjit, has been quite superb. As an observer looking in at schools and the provision, the speed and the care which was put into making sure that things picked up again, I think has been quite brilliant. A quick question. What do you want your international boarders to take away from their time at your school? Jamie?
That you always want them to try and make sure that they feel that they've created their own story, really. I think, part of what we want to do at Framlingham College, and I guess at all boarding schools, is that, that pupils come away with a greater confidence in their English ability, in the subjects that they've taken, but that they've actually had a really unique cultural experience that only boarding schools can provide. And they develop and build friendships and connections that will last them a lifetime, that they become truly global citizens. I think that's a key thing, but not in the sense that just them. It's because these international pupils are coming to the UK that they actually share their culture with the rest of the school as well. And it's a really interesting thing is you find that international pupils that come to the UK and come to boarding school will show a real sense of pride in their culture, their country, and that's even more heightened because they are away from home, and it's something that they want to share with their peers, and that's something that you hope that they get to do. And it means that not only do they come away as global citizens, but the UK pupils get a real sense of what it means to be a global citizen as well. And I think that's really key.
That's a super response, that it's a two-way process.
Absolutely.
Ranjit?
Yeah, one of the things we really want, clearly, exactly what Jamie said, that we want them to have stepped out of their comfort zone, and embrace everything that is on offer, and then have a very busy and full time or journey, however you want to look at it, so that they've not only grown as a person, but they've contributed to the school. They've taken something back with them, and then hopefully they return, ultimately as past members of the school, and with a real sense of belonging, and wanting to have been part of that journey. So that's in addition to what sort of Jamie said.
Colin? Please.
Yeah, I think to answer the question, what do we want our international boarders to take away? I think exactly the same as our UK boarders take away, which is very much our school's ethos and principles, which will be the same for all of the boarding schools. And I think the common factor amongst the boarding schools we're talking about is perhaps, as we mentioned, is a confidence and a resilience that perhaps you don't see elsewhere. And I think that is developed in a furnace of boarding school life over the years that the pupils are with us. And it really does stand them out amongst pupils from different educational backgrounds. And I think that's something that we're immensely proud of.
Here, and that is a super summation of a good UK boarding school education. You get so much more in terms of character, as well as great academic education. That's lovely. Last formal question, if I may. Communication with parents. We talked about it a little bit earlier, in case there are ropey moments in the first week. But how do you find, or what are the expectations with communicating with international parents who might well be on the other side of the world, different time zones? Ranjit, please.
Yeah, I mean, as much as possible, the tutor is going to be communicating, be it by phone, if possible, email. Zoom is certainly coming to the front now, where you can have a chat. And it's just useful to be able to have that one-to-one and personal communication. Now, sometimes that's not possible because of a language barrier with parents. And in that case, then hopefully the guardian is available, and the communication would be through the guardian. Certainly, all emails, regardless, would go to parents, and certainly some things we would be able to translate. And in many cases, because I think a lot of schools, and I guess most of them are, we have a lot of different languages available to our staff, because with us doing the IB, we have to cover everybody that wants to do that at an international level, language level. So sometimes we're actually able to communicate directly through our staff if language is an issue. And then we've also got our sick bay, so our nursing team. This is not the same thing as a matron, but our actual nursing team. If there were issues there, then of course they would also contact parents. So give them the sort of first hand of if there happened to be an issue or there was a medical thing. So we do have a very good way of getting in touch, and as personal as possible. And some want it and want more of it, and that's fine. And some sort of take the minimum, really, and parents are quite happy for the school to get on.
But you understand the families and work out what they need and want to be reassured, because it's about reassurance.
Absolutely. So those that are slightly more anxious, then they will have more communication, and probably the housemaster and housemistress would be even more involved with that, being boarders. But if they don't need it and they don't want it, then they will get something regardless. We'll insist on that, but we won't be sort of banging on their door.
Super. Colin?
I think two things, really. Our communication with parents has changed no end of the last few years. I think we used to communicate very formally, probably once or twice a year, with a very formal report that was written. Now it's much more frequent, possibly more informal, emails, phone calls, chats. Tutors have an important relationship with pupils, but now have a very good relationship with parents as well. You can't tutor a child properly if you don't know what the parents' aspirations and concerns are for that child. And so that relationship is really important. And so rather than a once a year formal big long letter, these are frequent little snippets of communications now, which I think parents very much appreciate. The other thing which we've done, which I suspect a few of my colleagues might also have done, we hadn't really used Zoom at all pre-COVID very much, but we arranged our parent-teacher meetings last year for obvious reasons via Zoom and now on Teams. And it was such an enormous success. It doesn't matter whether you're a parent in Manchester, London, Paris, Australia. It's just far more convenient to have a face-to-face conversation with your pupils, teachers, tutors, and housemasters, and you can get through so much more to do that. So we've actually finished all of our meetings in schools, which were a bit of a bun fight, and now we have these wonderful Teams meetings or Zoom meetings with parents all over the world, and they're frequent, and that's been a huge success, which we hadn't anticipated.
Great. Well, it's a super byproduct. Jamie?
I think just like they said, I mean, we're so fortunate in this time and age where we've got to Zoom, we've got Teams where we can kind of communicate with parents, not just by phone or email, but actually kind of see them face to face, even though it's by screen. You still get that kind of personal touch, I think. And tutors, like Colin said, tutors play a huge part, and we've got tutors that kind of stay with the pupils, the same tutor group from years 9 to year 11. so they get to really know them, but also get to know the parents really well, wherever possible. You know, they stay with them, and then the sort of sixth form, those 2 years of sixth form, again, there'll be a new tutor, but again, stick with them for the 2 years. And I think that's key, is I think in all schools, and we've all said it, tutors are the main contact with parents, and that's become a big thing where they, you know, it is very regular contact with parents.
Super. I'm getting questions in, and I'm going to fire those so that the panel have no ideas what's coming up. And I'm going to direct them at you rather than ask for volunteers, because you'll all avoid the difficult ones. What support do students get from schools regarding university advice? And do you only focus on UK universities? Jamie?
So there's a dedicated UCAS team. We actually use Unifrog, which is a sort of an app that we introduced to year 9s, actually, all the way from as young as year 9, where they build up a sort of portfolio, and by the time they get to year 11, end of year 11, they're starting to add in, you know, potential universities they'd like to go visit, and that, or like to attend. But it's not solely UK universities. We do have look at European universities. We do look at American universities as well. I think anything further afield, if it's Hong Kong universities, it's Australia or something like that, again, we have the team, the UCAS team, that would help the individuals to try and sort of go for those universities. It's just maybe we don't have the full expertise in further afield.
Okay, and it's a super answer, and I know, because I've looked into it recently, how many of the good boarding schools, yourselves included, that certainly a UK education involving A-levels or the IB or even BTEC, and I say even BTEC as if it's a lesser qualification, and it really isn't, but those qualifications lead to university places all over the world.
Yeah.
And because it's not just about the academics, it's about all the stuff that they have learned at boarding schools. I'm not going to ask that question, I'm going to ask another question. How does an international parent feel that their child, or know that their child, will be treated fairly? An interesting and difficult question. How does an international parent know that their child will be treated fairly? Ranjit.
Yeah, that's thanks for that. I don't think they can know anything until really they make that relationship with either the tutor or housemaster or housemistress. I think you can read a lot and you can watch a lot and you can sort of listen to us speaking now, but I think it does come down to that relationship and that building of trust. And I think that's where it's got to be. But I don't think that's any different from a UK parent, to be honest. It's exactly the same thing. You don't know it until you have that relationship, and we are, as Colin says, more and more. It is not just a relationship with the pupils. It is a relationship with the family. We're on this journey together.
Yeah. And I think Colin's earlier answered something else, where, Colin, you talked about the clarity of the mission statement or the values of the school. Because if those are clear and the pupils understand them, then fairness should result.
Absolutely, and it's critical. The question, I think, referred to how do international parents. I would repeat an earlier answer and say that it's the same with all parents, because we're a full boarding school, so we don't have any day pupils. And so therefore none of our parents are here every day to try and influence matters. So we have to be fair with all of our pupils. London's as far away as Australia is, as far as our pupils are concerned. Our parents aren't here. So if we have to be fair to all of our pupils. I hope we're very transparent. We're certainly significantly more transparent as an educational body now, I think, than we were 20 or 30 years ago. The nature of social media and instant communication, there's no secrets anymore. Things get home very, very quickly, and as they should do, quite rightly, and we should be transparent.
And therefore nipping things in the bud that might blow up, hugely important, and that's tutors and matrons and house staff and yourselves as deputy heads and international student officers. The last question, please, and it's going to come to Colin. Very interesting. Well, what are the key skills that employers look for from your schools? I suppose it's more about what are the key skills that are developed at your schools that employers will find useful in the future.
And it's a really good question, and one we get asked at almost every prospective parent meeting. The difference, an awful lot of pupils from British schools will leave schools with remarkably similar grades, and then get similar degrees from similar universities. And that's when I think boarding schools have an advantage, because of, we mentioned earlier, I think the character, the confidence and the resilience is what distinguishes our pupils from many others from elsewhere. And if I can return to what I said, I think that character and resilience comes from the fact that we're offering an environment which is 24/7, and children are being challenged in so many different directions routinely, not just in the classroom, but whether it's with music, with drama, being made to go and sing or perform in front of their colleagues. It develops an inner confidence, which later on, when you have to go and talk to a boardroom or whatever, a company business, that I think you have a confidence which is ingrained inside you. And I think that's what stands boarding schools apart.
Super. Jamie, anything to add there, please?
I think when you throw pupils into a boarding house together and they have to live there for 6-7 years, you know, they definitely build that kind of resilience, don't they? That confidence and understanding of how to deal with different situations and things like that. So absolutely, I think, you know, just as Colin said, you know, it is that confidence that boarding schools develop in young people.
Super. Ranjit.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you pick up all those leadership skills as well. If you go through eventually to sixth form and you pick up the prefect system. But regardless of whether you do that or not, most of our schools will do sort of public speaking, English speaking board, and they'll go through that. They pick up a lot of, because they're here 24/7, they pick up a lot of skills along the way. They have a massive portfolio by the end of it. They don't realize it until someone asks them, well, you know, as Colin says, everyone does the same grades, they get the same university degree, what else have they done? And they'll just pull a whole raft of things out that they've achieved and got involved with. They'll get involved with a lot of outdoor activities, a lot of sport, a lot of art based, a lot of drama, you know, especially sort of putting themselves on the stage, the music side, and all of those pulled together to make them a very confident young person and able to go forward with those skills.
Super. I mean, one of the reasons that I particularly enjoy working with your schools and others who work with us is that the end product, and it's a horrible phrase, but the boys and girls who leave your schools, they all show confidence without arrogance. And that is a really, really important differentiator of a good boarding education. People who are collegiate, who work together, but don't think that they are better than anybody else on earth. And that is why to have more and more international pupils is such a boon, such a help, because we're all together and they will be in the world of work and at university working with people from all over the world. So the preparation they get at your schools is absolutely spot on. We're out of questions and we're out of time. So thank you very, very much to all those of you who have attended. The recording of the session will be made available and the details will be sent through to you after the webinar. But a huge thank you to Jamie, to Ranjit and to Colin for giving up their time at a phenomenally busy point in the academic calendar, as they are at the moment having to assess pupils' performance for GCSEs, IGCSEs, A-levels and other examinations without the pupils being able to sit examinations. And I know that has been a real pressure and a headache for staff. So thank you so much for joining and for giving us a really, really detailed insight into the lives of your schools and why international boarders succeed and thrive, feel challenged and are happy at your schools and all other good UK boarding schools. So thank you to the three of you for your time And at this point, we will turn our cameras and our sound off and wish you all, wherever you are in the world, a very happy, safe weekend. All the very best. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.